The Arizona Territory dust swirled like angry spirits around the weathered porch of the Whitmore Ranch house, where 17-year-old Elena Martinez stood frozen in the doorway, her olive skin pale as parchment. Through the cracked window, she watched her father's calloused hands count the gold coins that glinted like devil's eyes in the afternoon sun. Before we begin, we'd like to ask you to tell us your name and the city you're watching from. We love getting to know our audience. Also, please don't forget to give this video a like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. That way we can keep bringing you more stories like this one. 20 pieces of gold for a virgin bride, came the honeyed voice of Cornelius Blackwood, whose reputation for charm was only surpassed by his cruelty toward women. Your daughter will want for nothing in my household, Senator Martinez. She'll have silk dresses, fine jewelry, everything a woman could desire. Elena's stomach churned as she pressed herself against the rough adobe wall. She had known this day would come since childhood, the day her father's gambling debts would finally catch up with him, and she would become the currency to pay them. But hearing it spoken aloud, watching the transaction unfold like a cattle auction, made her knees buckle with horror. Elena is pure, untouched. As promised, her father's voice cracked with shame. He tried to hide behind bravado. She's been raised to be an obedient wife. She can cook, clean, and bear you many sons. Blackwood's laugh was like the rattle of a snake before it strikes. Oh, I'm sure she can do much more than that. Young women have such ... spirit that needs proper breaking. I have experience in that area, as you well know. The implication in his words made Elena's blood run cold. She had heard the whispers in town about Blackwood's previous wives, how they had all died under mysterious circumstances, how their spirits seemed broken long before their bodies gave out. The most recent one, barely 19, had been found at the bottom of a ravine just 3 months prior. As the men continued their negotiation, treating her like livestock, Elena's mind raced. She thought of Maria Santos, the baker's daughter who had tried to refuse an arranged marriage, and was now locked in her father's cellar until she came to her senses. She thought of the Apache woman she had seen in town last month, proud and free despite the suspicious stares of the townspeople, her eyes holding a strength Elena had never seen in any white woman. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Elena of fire and freedom. She knew that once Blackwood left with those signed papers, her fate would be sealed. There would be no escape from his ranch, no hope of a different future. The wedding will be next Sunday, Blackwood announced, standing and adjusting his expensive vest. I'll send my men to collect her on Saturday. Make sure she's ready, bathed, dressed appropriately, and compliant. I don't tolerate disobedience in my household. Elena's father nodded eagerly, already pocketing the gold. She'll be ready. Senator Blackwood, you have my word. As Blackwood's carriage disappeared into the desert heat waves, Elena felt something inside her snap like a dry twig. Would not be bought and sold like a prized heifer. She would not become another mysterious casualty of Cornelius Blackwood's twisted desires. That night, as her father celebrated his newfound wealth with a bottle of whiskey, Elena packed what little she could carry in a small cloth bundle. She had no plan, no destination, only the desperate knowledge that death in the desert was preferable to a life of horror as Blackwood's possession. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Elena Martinez slipped out of her father's house and into the vast unknown of the Arizona wilderness, her bare feet silent on the rocky ground, her heart pounding with terror and hope in equal measure. The desert night was merciless, its beauty hiding thorns that tore at Elena's thin cotton dress and rocks that cut her feet until they bled. She had been running for hours, driven by pure adrenaline and the terrifying knowledge that Blackwood's men would soon discover her absence and give chase. The moon, nearly full, cast eerie shadows across the landscape of saguaro, cacti, and jagged rock formations. Every sound made her jump, the hoot of an owl, the scurry of a jackrabbit, the distant howl of a coyote. But worse than any natural sound was the one that now reached her ears, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. Lena, Blackwood's voice carried across the desert like a death sentence. Come back now, and I might forgive this foolishness. Make me chase you further, and you'll learn what real discipline means. Tara gave her feet wings, but exhaustion was taking its toll. Her lungs burned, her legs shook, and her vision blurred. With tears of desperation, she stumbled over a hidden stone and went down hard, her hands scraping against sharp gravel. Behind her, the hoofbeats grew closer. "There, I see movement by those rocks," one of Blackwood's men shouted. Alina forced herself to stand and keep running, but her body was failing her. She rounded a large boulder and collided directly with what felt like a solid wall. Strong hands caught her before she could fall, and she found herself looking up into the darkest, most intense eyes she had ever seen. The man before her was tall and lean, his long black hair partially braided with small beads and feathers. His bronze skin seemed to absorb the moonlight, and traditional Apache clothing marked him as one of the savage people her father had always warned her about. But there was nothing savage in the way he steadied her gently, his touch careful despite his obvious strength. "Please," Alina whispered in Spanish, then switched to broken English. "Help me. They want to take me. They want to hurt me." The Apache warrior's eyes flicked toward the approaching sounds of pursuit, then back to her face. Without a word, he swept her up in his arms and carried her swiftly behind a cluster of large rocks, pressing a finger to his lips to signal silence. His movements were fluid and silent as flowing water. "Check behind those rocks, Martinez." Blackwood's voice was closer now, filled with rage. "If she's hidden somewhere, I'll burn this whole desert to find her," Lena pressed herself against the warrior's chest, feeling his steady heartbeat against her cheek. His arms encircled her protectively, and for the first time since her ordeal began, she felt safe. This stranger, this man her people called enemy, was risking his own safety to protect her. Spread out. She can't have gone far on foot. The sounds of the search party fanned out across the desert, their torchlights flickering like fireflies in the darkness. For what felt like hours, the Apache warrior held her in perfect stillness, his breathing steady and controlled. She could smell the leather of his clothing, sage and desert herbs that clung to his skin. The clean scent of someone who lived in harmony with the land rather than trying to conquer it. Gradually, the voices faded into the distance as the search party moved on, convinced she had gone in a different direction. Only when complete silence had returned to the desert did the warrior finally relax his protective embrace. "They are gone," he said in accented but clear English, his voice deep and reassuring. "But they will return with more men when the sun rises. You cannot stay here." Alina looked up at him, studying his face in the moonlight. There, but also kindness. Something she had never seen in Blackwood's cold features or her father's weak ones. "I am Nulnish," he said simply. "And you are running from the white man who thinks he can buy women like horses." "How did you know?" Lena asked, surprised by his understanding. "I have watched. I have seen what men like him do." His jaw tightened. "No woman should be traded like goods. This is not the Apache way. I'm Alina," she whispered, "and I would rather die free in this desert than live as his prisoner." Nulnish studied her face for a long moment, as if weighing something important in his mind. "Then you will not die," he said finally, "and you will be free." Nulnish led Alina deeper into the desert, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every rock and shadow. They walked for hours through terrain that would have been impossible for her to navigate alone, till they reached a hidden canyon where a small spring bubbled up from underground. "Rest here," he said, gesturing to a smooth rock formation that provided shelter from the wind. "I will tend to your feet." Elena looked down at her battered feet with embarrassment. They were cut, swollen, and caked with dried blood and dirt. "I can take care of myself," she said, though she sank gratefully onto the rock. "Pride is useful for courage," Nulnish replied, kneeling beside the spring to gather water in his cupped hands, "but foolish for healing." He approached her slowly, as if she were a frightened animal that might bolt. When she didn't move away, he gently took one of her feet in his hands and began to clean the wounds with water that was surprisingly warm. Alina had never had a man touch her feet. Before, such intimacy was reserved for husbands, according to her strict Catholic upbringing. But there was nothing improper about Nulnish's touch. His hands were gentle and clinical, focused only on healing her injuries. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as he carefully removed thorns and debris from her cuts. Your people and mine. We're supposed to be enemies. Nilesh paused in his work to look at her. White men make wars over land and gold. Apache make war to protect what is ours. But you are not a soldier. You're a woman running from cruelty. The Great Spirit does not see the color of skin when someone needs help. As he spoke, he pulled small pouches from his belongings and began applying what looked like plant paste to her wounds. The cooling sensation was immediate and soothing. This will heal the cuts and prevent infection, he explained. Desert willow, bark, and prickly pear gel. The desert provides medicine for those who know how to ask. Alina watched his face as he worked, noting the concentration in his dark eyes, the gentleness of his movements. Were you always a healer? I am a warrior, he said simply. But warriors must know healing as well as fighting. How can you protect life if you cannot preserve it? The logic was so different from what she had been taught about Apache savages that it made her question everything else she had been told. My father always said your people were bloodthirsty killers who scalped innocent families. Nalnish's hand stilled on her foot. And what does my healing your wounds tell you about that? Alina felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm sorry. I was raised to believe what you were taught to believe, he corrected gently, resuming his work. Just as I was taught that all white men were greedy and cruel. But here you are, running from the very greed and cruelty I was warned about. As he finished bandaging her feet with strips of soft leather, Alina felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest. You speak English very well. I lived for 2 years with missionaries when I was young, he explained, settling beside her on the rock. They wanted to save my soul and make me into a white man. Instead, I learned your language and your ways, then returned to my people with knowledge that helps us survive. Don't you hate them? The missionaries, I mean? We're trying to change you? Nalnish considered this. Hatred is like carrying a burning coal in your hand, hoping to throw it at your enemy. It burns you more than them. I learned what was useful and left the rest. Alina found herself studying his profile in the starlight. He was unlike any man she had ever encountered. Neither the brutal masculinity that Blackwood represented, nor the weak submission her father showed. There was a quiet strength about him, a confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and where he belonged. What will happen to me now? She asked quietly. I can never go back. Blackwood will never stop looking for me and my father. He'll never forgive me for losing him that gold. Then you will find a new path, Nalnish said matter-of-factly. The desert is full of new paths for those brave enough to walk them. But I don't know how to survive out here. Can't live like ... like this. She gestured helplessly at the wilderness around them. Like what? Free? There was amusement in his voice, but not mockery. You think living in a house with a cruel man is better than living under the stars with hope? Alina had no answer for that. She had been so focused on the security of walls and a roof that she had never considered what those walls might become. A prison. A place where screams couldn't be heard. My people have a saying, Nalnish continued. The bird that has never left its cage thinks the cage is the world. But once it flies free, it understands that the cage was never protection. It was limitation. As Alina drifted off to sleep, against the warm rock, lulled by the gentle sound of the spring and the profound safety she felt in this stranger's presence, she began to wonder if perhaps she had been living in a cage her entire life without realizing it. Alina woke to the sound of horses approaching fast. The lynch was already alert, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and orange. Blackwood. Alina, whispered fear sharp in her voice. Nalnish listened intently to the hoofbeats. No, Apache riders. My brother and cousin. He stood and gave a specific bird call that echoed off the canyon walls. The approaching horses slowed, and soon 2 Apache warriors appeared at the canyon entrance. The conversation that followed was rapid and intense, conducted entirely in Apache. Alina could only watch the expressions on their faces: concern, anger, and what looked like heated disagreement. Finally, Nalnish turned back to her. Blackwood has offered a reward for your return, dead or alive. He has convinced the cavalry that you were kidnapped by Apache raiders, and that I am holding you against your will." Elena's blood ran cold. "But that's not true. Truth matters little when gold speaks louder," Nalnish replied grimly. "They are already forming a large search party. By noon, this entire area will be crawling with soldiers and bounty hunters." His brother spoke again urgently, gesturing toward Elena. She didn't need to understand the words to grasp the meaning. She was a danger to them all.
He wants me to leave you, Nalnish.
Translated, "To let you find your own way while we disappear into the deep desert where the cavalry cannot follow." Elena felt her heart sink. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for how much the thought of losing Nalnish's protection, his presence, would hurt. "He's right," she said quietly. "I've brought you nothing but trouble. You should go." Nalnish studied her face for a long moment. "Is that what you want? To face Blackwood and his men alone?" Delena's hands trembled as she tried to imagine returning to that life of captivity and abuse. "No," she whispered, "but I won't ask you to risk your life for mine." "You are not asking," Nalnish said firmly. "I am choosing." He turned to his brother and spoke again in Apache, his voice steady and resolute. Whatever he said caused both men to look at Elena with surprise, then at each other with what appeared to be resignation. "What did you tell them?" Elena asked. "That you are under my protection, that where I go, you go, that any who wish to harm you must first get past me." His brother spoke once more, his tone gentler now, almost respectful. "Right." Nalnish nodded and turned back to Elena. "My brother says if you are to be one of us, you must choose it completely. The life of our people is hard, especially for women not born to it. You cannot change your mind when things become difficult." Elena looked around the canyon, at the harsh beauty of the desert landscape, at the men who had risked their own safety to help a stranger. She thought of Blackwood's cold hands and colder heart, of her father's willingness to sell her for gold, of the cage she had been raised in, without ever knowing it was a cage. "I choose this," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I choose freedom. I choose to belong to myself instead of being owned by someone else." Nalnish smiled, the first full smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. "Then we go north, to the winter camps in the mountains. It will be a hard journey, but by the time the snows melt, you will be far from Blackwood's reach." As they prepared to leave the canyon, Nalnish's cousin approached Elena and placed a small leather pouch in her hands. When she opened it, she found traditional Apache moccasins, soft and perfectly sized for her feet. "From my wife," Nalnish translated the man's words. "She says no woman should walk the warrior's path in bare feet." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. These people who owed her nothing were already treating her like family. How can I ever repay such kindness? "By living free," Nalnish said simply. "By becoming the woman you were meant to be instead of the possession someone else wanted you to become." As they rode north toward the mountains, Elena sitting behind Nalnish on his strong horse, she felt something she had never experienced. Before the exhilarating terror and boundless possibility of an unknown future, behind them, dust clouds marked where Blackwood's search party combed the desert for a woman who no longer existed, Elena Martinez. The frightened girl who had been sold like cattle was gone. In her place rode a woman learning what it meant to be truly free, protected not by walls and rules, but by her own courage and the honor of a man who had seen her worth when no one else would. The desert wind whipped through her hair as they climbed toward the mountains, carrying away the last traces of her old life and promising adventures she could never have imagined from inside her gilded cage. For the first time in her life, Elena smiled with genuine joy, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as a free woman, and she would never be bought or sold again.